So, this Sunday is the first Sunday of Unity's Advent season. Unity's Advent season starts with the idea of faith. Charles Fillmore called faith the perceiving power of the mind linked with the ability to shape substance. We also know it's the hope of things unseen, right? And the idea of faith then rolls into the experience of peace in our hearts. And when peace is born in our hearts, it expands the space for experiencing love. And when faith, peace, and love are present, the natural result is joy. Not joy of the human condition or the ego mind's sense that I have what I want or I don't have what I don't want, but a spiritual joy, a deep joy. And that is the birthing of the Christ presence, the awakening within. And so we often talk on this first Sunday about faith. What is faith, and how does it operate in your life? I had the gift over this Thanksgiving break of reading a letter that my father wrote to my little brother when he was born and baptized. There was an initiative in our family by his mama for everyone to write a letter to this little baby boy who is about 2 months old for his baptism in the Catholic Church. And so there are 5 of us siblings, and so we each wrote a little letter. My dad wrote a letter. We all wrote them and put them in envelopes. And this little brother, if you know anything kind of about my history, my father just recently passed the last couple of years. And so everything's new, right? Thanksgiving, everything's new, everything's different. I would say it's uncomfortable as well, but it's just very different. And so Thanksgiving was always the time that we had with my dad, always since growing up. It was always our McCabe time. And so my little brother, who is now in his, he could be 40. It's bad that I'm not sure, but he's older. He's not so little, and he's very tall. But he's my baby brother. And he has a little one now. He just had a little girl, and she was just born in the summer. And he found these letters that we gave him when he turned 18. So it's an envelope of letters. And he found them, he got them when he was 18, but he probably, breezed over them. But recently, with his baby girl, he was going through boxes and stuff, and he found these letters, and he brought them to Thanksgiving, and we were each able to take a peek at what we wanted to see. Now, my letter was kind of ridiculous. I vaguely remember, and I think my dad we said, well, what are we writing to this little 2.5-month-old baby? What am I supposed to say? And I think he said, just tell him about your life, which is apparently what I did, because it was all just about what was happening with me and my girlfriends at the time, and some guy that apparently I was dating who I have no idea what his name even was. I don't even know who that boy was. But I got to my dad's letter. Oh. And my dad doesn't give advice. My dad was subtle. He would say things at the right time, but he never oversaid anything. He certainly didn't micromanage you in any way, shape, or form. But he gave these nuggets, these quiet nuggets. And in this letter that was long, it was gorgeously long, he's writing to my brother and talking about the sacred act of baptism and what it means. And he writes a bit about the spiritual practice and how his desire for him and his hope is that he finds a spiritual practice that guides his life, that nourishes him. But he goes into this whole setup as a good statistician would. And he goes into this whole setup. And then he says, I guess I'm saying all of this to make the space to give you some advice. Now you can imagine to each of us reading this letter over Thanksgiving from a dad who is now in his freedom form, who didn't give that much direction, you know what I'm saying? Didn't say do this or don't do that. Just did a lot of leading by example and giving love. And in this letter was like one thing after another of this beautiful advice. Things like be yourself, be true to yourself beyond all things. And it just went on and on. But the peace that it gave me to read this letter and to think of having those words of wisdom and knowing that without teaching them, without saying them, he offered them. He lived into them, right? That's part of the spiritual practice, is that we don't just have these ideas, we breathe life into them. We bring life into them. So faith is not just something that we apply on a Sunday morning. Faith is a practice. It is something that we become. How do we open our hearts and our lives to faith so that we are living it? How do you live your faith? How do you use and how do I use the perceiving power of mind linked with the ability to shape substance, to move through this life in a more grace-filled way? That's what I think faith is. Faith is, how do I use my practice? How do I use my ideas and my concepts of God consciousness, of God, whatever that name is or no name at all? How do I use that, my understanding, the highest understanding, the God of my understanding? How do I use that to create a life of faith? Not faith as far as hope, like wishing for things, but faith like this is the rock that I stand on. This is what I live by. I went to Thanksgiving in Colorado where we all gathered, and I have a bunch of friends from college in Colorado, so we got to get together with a couple of friends, and we went to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, which was cool. It's where I used to take the kids when I was a fourth grade teacher. I took the kids on an overnight. That was one of their field trips, and we set it up that they could have an overnight in the museum. And so I was back there, and there were a lot of different things there, but we went to the planetarium and took these little 6-year-olds to the planetarium. And I am just sitting there in the planetarium in awe, in awe. When you see these films about the galaxies and the cosmos, right? It is just remarkable. It is just remarkable. And you look out and it talks about life on each planet and how possible it could be for life to be on these planets, and then the galaxies, and you get to see it, and then you get to see the Earth, and here comes the Earth, and there's water and there's space for life. And you get to zoom in, and then you think about us, and you think about how teeny tiny we are. Teeny, teeny, tiny. We are so teeny tiny. Like, don't you sometimes feel big and like we're big? What about at Thanksgiving? Did anything feel big? Did you have any big emotions? Did you feel like anything was important or significant, right? We are so teeny tiny. We are so teeny tiny. We're not faced with it every moment because it's not in front of us. And then you think of things like war, and you think of things like separation or conflicts, right? You think of conflicts, and it's like, how could there be conflicts when we're all in this teeny tiny little marble rolling through space around this beautiful sun in the cosmos, of which there are ethers and ethers and ethers and ethers? And we, these little teeny tiny things, seek peace and seek happiness. I want to share a passage from Eckhart Tolle, one of the greatest teachers of mindfulness of our time. He says, don't seek happiness. If you seek it, you won't find it, because seeking is the antithesis of happiness. Happiness is ever elusive, but freedom from unhappiness is attainable now by facing what is rather than making up stories about it. Unhappiness covers up your natural state of well-being and inner peace, the source of true happiness. So if the source of true happiness is covered up by this seeking, by this finding, by this trying, can I try to apply my faith? Can I try to find happiness? Can I try to feel important or not feel so insignificant? What does the practice give us with all of this? I think we sometimes simplify the Unity Advent process by looking at faith and going, okay, well, have faith. There's the first Sunday. Have faith. But it's not about having faith. It's about living our faith. It's about becoming it. Because when we seek it, it is elusive. And we often talk about faith without talking about what accompanies faith. Because faith is often the seeking for happiness. It's often applied to try to find happiness or to try to find peace, to try to find love and to try to find joy, right? So in trying to find these other things, we say, if I could just have faith. But there are other things that walk along with faith that we don't always talk about. One is connection. Connection. When we activate our faith, when we become our practice, connection is important. Sometimes many of us try to have faith in the universe, in God, in love, but we pull back our connections. We limit our connections. We make judgments, ideas, and we push connection away. Or we pray to an outside God like it's Santa to try to magically do something to affect things, and then we just sit here going, come on, do it to me. And then we get disappointed and upset with God that it's not coming or it's not happening. But all the while, Godness is working in and through everything in you, everything around you, just like the cosmos, to bring to you, to bring through you everything that's needed in each moment. But we sometimes get so human in our connections. Well, not from over there, or not like this. Or I can't share my struggles. I can't share my struggles because I've got to be strong. I've got to keep it to myself. I can't be vulnerable with other people. When there is source, there is spirit whispering in our hearts. Here's the hand. Here's the hand of God to be with you. Here's the heart. Here's the heart of God to love you. Here's the voice. Here's the voice of God to sing to you. Here are the eyes. Here are the eyes of God to witness you. Here's the sound to be with you, to comfort you. We don't always talk about forgiveness when it comes to faith. But forgiveness is a huge part of faith, because think about the concept of forgiveness. The concept of forgiveness is tied into the idea that something that's happening right now, something as is, like Eckhart Tolle said, being with what is, something as is not okay, right? Because think about faith. Faith is I trust. Faith is I have an unwavering aspect in me that carries me, that I know, just like the cosmos is in order, I know so too is my life. So too is my being. No matter what comes to me on the outside, no matter what it looks like, I can be comfortable with what is, because I know that God is the good that will unfold in and through and as anything that comes about. So I can stand in whatever is, and I can trust it. But what is a lack of forgiveness? A lack of forgiveness is saying, I don't want the moment as it is. It shouldn't be like this. They shouldn't be showing up like this. This shouldn't be happening. It is a resistance to what is. It is, in a sense, a lack of faith. Now, it's okay. It's part of the human condition. No one likes things that aren't great. Look at our little young one, though, that's growing up, learning unity and learning from the beautiful adults around them that sometimes pain is part of the process. Now, amen to that. A child that learns from the beginning that pain is a natural aspect of life. I mean, my God, do you wish you got that in elementary school? Right? If you just got and then the other little child that said, well, sometimes it hurts. Yeah, sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's not going to feel good. Sometimes it's going to feel like what is and what's going on is not how I want it to be. But if I have faith, if I live into my faith, I know that even in the midst of that, I am strong, I am carried. There is something more than me here. It's like zooming out in that planetarium, zooming out from this little marble, this little green and blue marble floating through space with all these beautiful little teeny tiny people on it. And it's going, I'm okay. Guess what? I am like rolling through space and I am like pissed off something happened at Thanksgiving. Whatever it is, you fill in the blank. I'm mad about the whatever it is. Whatever it is not going right in my life. Whatever it is not how I would have chosen it or I would pick it right now, right? Can forgiveness be just letting go? Letting go of all of that. Letting go of having to be right. Letting go of things being wrong. Letting go of it being wrong if things feel wrong. That's life, living itself. That's part of the human condition. It's going to be like that. But can we still live into forgiveness? Not meaning forgiveness in the way that it's like, oh, it's good something bad happened, but forgiveness with faith. Forgiveness with faith, standing in the principle and standing in the practice that even though I might not understand this right now, even though I might not want this right now, even though maybe I'm not choosing this set of circumstances consciously, I'm okay. I can be at peace, even in the midst of this. And I can apply forgiveness because I'm more committed to peace than I am to resentment. And it is in my nature, but that lack of forgiveness covers up what is in my nature. It is in my nature to have this peace. Can I walk with faith and forgiveness? Because if we're really becoming our faith, if we're really becoming it, then we have a walk of non-resistance. And a walk of non-resistance is a walk of forgiveness. It's a walk of connection. Forgiveness can be tricky. Faith is trusting that there's a benevolent force, right? That there is God, a power in this universe, that it is love, it is goodness, that it is generative, it is creative. It is moving everything in a positive way in the upward spiral of evolution. But forgiveness is still feeling hurt, bothered, like something was wrong, that the having to apply forgiveness. So can we get over the human concepts so that we can get into the spiritual practice? Martin Luther King Jr. said, forgiveness is not an occasional act, it's a constant attitude. It's not an occasional act, it's a constant attitude. And I would say that that constant attitude is required and necessary to walk our faith. Because faith is about allowing trust and connection and goodness to supersede the human condition of fear and separation and black and white thinking, right and wrong. It's being able to walk through all of that spiritually. Mark Twain said, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. Bernard Metzler said, when you forgive, you don't change the past, but you change the future. That leads into what Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, said about faith. It's the perceiving power of the mind linked with the ability to shape substance. We forget that when we constrict, that when we limit our connections, that when we limit God, that the only thing that can limit God is us in our minds. It's all here, it's all given. And faith is trusting that. It's absolutely trusting that. And that practice, that process is what changes the future. When we begin to constrict, when we begin to separate, when we begin to us and them, when we can't let go of the past and just allow ourselves to smell the fragrance, allow ourselves to be with the new what is, we limit ourselves. So can we move into forgiveness as liberation, forgiveness as reconciliation, forgiveness as self-compassion, forgiveness as a process, forgiveness as empathy, forgiveness as wellness, forgiveness as healthy boundaries, forgiveness as strength, not weakness. Someone said forgiveness does not excuse behavior. Forgiveness prevents behavior from destroying your heart. So can we think about the sisters of faith? The sisters of faith are all of those connections that go along with it. So can you think this week, as you go about this week, can we each dive in to a process and a practice to make this Advent season come alive? And to really look at anything that can awaken your faith. What is the practice that will awaken your faith? Maybe we've simplified faith too much. We've simplified it too much, or we've made it too lofty, right? What can we practically apply to our lives as far as forgiveness, as far as connections, that will allow us to be at peace with what is? Because so much is judgment. You know, those little tiny little people on the planet Earth, those little teeny tiny people. Some people would call us insignificant, right? I mean, if you think of an ant to us, think of the littlest insect and pick one you don't care about. And then how that is to you, right? Do you think of that as like a sacred divine being? Are you in awe? And then think about your little self rolling around through space on this little marble and go far out into the galaxies, so far out that even the little marble can't be seen. What is that to something else? But in God's mind, that little marble, along with all of the black matter, the dark space, along with the black holes in the cosmos, along with that little blue and green marble, along with you, along with the ant, it's all sacred. It's all a reflection of the same divine love, the same essence of life, the same faculty in motion that is magnificent. It is only the human condition that calls one better or worse, one significant or insignificant. It's all a reflection of the divine. We tend in the human condition to think, if I'm strong, right? If I'm powerful, if I have money, then this. If I have power, then this. If I have XYZ, you fill in the blank, then that means significant. It's all a total illusion. It's all the activity of life living itself. That is you, that is me, and that is worth our faith in the process of life and our faith in God. Namaste.